there's a lot of holidays on the calendar, but where the heck do they all come from? Well, let's talk about some of it. So it's February, and that means Valentine's Day is coming. Now, this is one a lot of people speculate about. It's kind of considered the original Hallmark holiday. In other words, a holiday that was just invented to sell greeting cards. But actually, Valentine's Day has been celebrated for a pretty long time. So the first formal written Valentine we have evidence of is from 1415. Charles, Duke of Orleans, wrote a poem to his wife after being captured in battle. They start appearing more in the 1500s. 1600s, etc. Commercially printed Valentines start appearing in the 1700s, and the first commercial Valentines printed in the United States are actually from the 1840s, and the Hallmark Company does not come into existence until 1910. And actually, the very first Hallmark cards were actually postcards. They started out selling picture postcards. Although a few years later, they do get on board with selling Valentine's Day cards, and they probably are responsible for making it a bigger deal in the United States. So, but really, where did this holiday come from? Who is this Saint Valentine's we're always hearing about? And what exactly does Saint Valentine have to do with romantic love? And where did all this come from? And why did people start celebrating it on February 14th? Like most holidays, it's a bit of a twisted story. Now, the Catholic Church actually has 22 Saint Valentines on record, and 5 of them have their feast day listed as February 14th. So there's actually 2 Saint Valentines that are most commonly associated with Valentine's Day as we know it now. Saint Valentine of Rome and Saint Valentine of Tyranny both lived in the 3rd century, and both were killed by Roman emperors. And so what do these guys have to do with love and romance? The reality is absolutely nothing. There's lots of legends about them secretly marrying Christians and things like that, but there's no actual evidence to support any of this. The reality is, like most members of the early Christian church, they were persecuted by the Romans for preaching about Christianity, and they were both tortured in an effort to get them to renounce their faith. Neither one of them would do so, and they died and became martyrs and then named saints by the church. What Valentine's Day actually is, and why it exists in February, is it's a big pagan fertility festival. And what the Catholic Church does time and time again throughout history is they take these pagan festivals that they find offensive, and they basically steal them, and they name them after saints, and bury the pagan traditions, and try to say that they're somehow tied to these devout Christians who gave their life for the church. The original holiday was a Roman festival called Lupercalia, which was held on February 15th, or the Ides of February. Lupercalia comes from the Latin lupus, or wolf. The Romans were very fond of wolves, as legend holds that Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, had been raised by a wolf. So on February 15th, the Romans would have a big naked party that was all about love and fertility. They would sacrifice animals like goats and dogs and maybe wolves as well. And they would skin them. Then they would run around naked playing grab ass, and then they would try to slap women with the animal skins. And if you're a woman and you got smacked with the animal skin, it was supposed to make you more fertile. Lupercalia was also the origin of like the original key parties. They would put women's names in a clay jar, and then the men would take turns pulling the names out of the jar, and then those 2 people would hook up for the remainder of the festival and perhaps longer, and maybe have kids and maybe become husband and wife. This festival is also tied to the animal breeding season, so it was widely believed that the middle of February was the start of mating season for birds and some other animals. If you think about the idea of spring as being the season of new birth, right? That's when all the baby lambs and baby chicks and all these things are born. Well, if they're born in the spring, when are they conceived? Probably around February. So in ancient times, mid-February was celebrated as a time for getting it it on. Now, of course, as the Catholic Church makes the scene and starts to grow over the centuries, for whatever reason, Catholics hate the concept of sex and anything to do with sex. So, of course, Lupercalia is viewed as the most disgusting of holidays, and they want to get rid of it. So in the 5th century, Pope by the name of Gelasius declares that Lupercalia is heresy, bans its practice. He also decides that we should celebrate the feast of Saint Valentine, who had been martyred a couple hundred years earlier, on February 14th. So the Catholic Saint Valentine is really just a cover-up for this Latin sex festival. But it's much more in keeping with human nature to want to have a sex festival, so the themes of Lupercalia continue on throughout the centuries, despite the best efforts of the Catholic Church. I guess we should talk about Cupid, because Cupid is an essential icon for Valentine's Day. So Cupid was a Roman deity who was supposed to be the son of Mercury and Venus. The chubby little Cupid that we see today is actually a mutant Roman evolution from the Greek god Eros. Depending on which Greeks you read, Eros was either born from chaos and became a companion of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, or in some Greek tales, Eros is the son of Aphrodite. Either way, he starts out as a strapping young man who is the embodiment of love, passion, and fertility, which is why Eros is the root of the word erotic. The Greek playwright Euripides is the one who arms him with a bow and arrow. And if you get shot with one of Eros's arrows, you are supposed to fall hopelessly and madly in love. A story that's not told quite as much, though, is that Eros, aka Cupid, has 2 kinds of arrows in his quiver. One set will make you fall hopelessly in love. Another set will make you completely apathetic to the concept of love. In one Greek myth, Eros gets mad at Apollo, and he shoots Apollo with one of his love arrows, and then shoots the nymph Daphne with one of the anti-love arrows, thus making Apollo madly in love with a woman who has 0 interest in him whatsoever. Which is actually a very appropriate theme for Valentine's Day, so I feel like that story needs to be shared more often. So, in summation, the St. Valentines were 2 Latin dudes who got murdered by the emperor for refusing to renounce their Christian faith and had absolutely nothing to do with love or romance in any way, shape, or form until the 5th century Pope decided to use them as cover for an ancient Roman sex festival. Chubby baby Cupid was actually the Greek bow-hunk sex god Eros. Valentine's Day cards have been around for a few hundred years, but Hallmark didn't start making them till the 20th century.